Okay, and we are back. I was just saying that our next speaker is R. Michael Anderson. He is dialing in all the way from London. Michael is a best-selling author and a global speaker, and we'll be sharing some insights today with us about his new book, Leading in the Next Normal. So without any further ado, it is over to you, R. Michael Anderson.
All right. Well, hello everybody, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm joining you from London, but believe it or not, this isn't a Manchester accent. This isn't a Scottish accent. I'm actually American, and I married a lovely British woman, so I live over here in the UK. So I just want to give you some context to that. And it's been a very, very interesting time, obviously, for leaders around this time. I don't have to tell the people on this call that, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. And I just want to give you a little bit about my background, and I want to give you as much context as I can to help you as leaders and business owners, because Simon briefed me of who's out there and some of the challenges people are going through. And I'm going to give you, actually, I just came out with a book, actually, Leading in the Next Normal, and it's an international bestseller because leaders have to deal with so many different things now than we did a year plus ago. And what it does is it talks about, both in this session and the book, talk about all the different challenges we have now dealing with this massive amount of change, how to handle virtual teams, how to get people motivated and inspired, and employee well-being. The fact is people are burnt out and such. And I just, before going into the details of that, and so as I go through this, jot down any notes, because what's going to happen is I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my background and my story. I'm going to give you the 12 principles that I laid out that help leaders through this. But then Simon and I are going to get together, and he's going to ask me your questions so that you can get your direct questions answered. Because as good as I talk about what I've seen with other leaders, I want to make sure that everybody here gets as much value as they can out of this. So who am I? So I started out actually in technology. I started out as a programmer. I then started 3 of my own companies, and I realized that after I started my own companies, that I'm smart and I'm driven, and I understand business well, but I wasn't a good leader, and I was still a good manager. But when it came to when my company started scaling, I had one main company that really scaled quickly. And then all of a sudden, I was this programmer, this technical guy, and then all of a sudden I had a bunch of people, employees, that were looking to me for more. And I really didn't get leadership at that time. What I thought leadership was I would get in a whole bunch of tasks to do in projects. I would divvy out the tasks, and if people didn't get them done as fast or as well as I thought, then I would just get angry and frustrated at them. And obviously that wasn't a good way to go through things. And the larger we got, the more my deficiencies around leaderships got exposed, and it caused problems. It caused problems in the business. It caused problems for me professionally and monetarily. It caused issues emotionally, and it caused issues mentally, because that was such a difficult time for me. And I realized that I had to make a change, because all the things that made me a good technical person, I'm a little bit, believe it or not, I'm a bit introverted. I'm good at analyzing things. I'll outwork any problem. But all of a sudden I have these people, and now what I have to do is I have to motivate and inspire them. I have to be great at communication. I need emotional intelligence. It's not just about directing people. It's about getting people on board with who I am and what the company's doing and the purpose, and really developing a culture. And I sort of understood all those things intellectually, but I didn't understand exactly how to integrate and implement that. And so I realized, and there's a longer dramatic story about this that has to do with a business partner assaulting me, punching me in my own office, divorce, substance abuse, restraining orders, lawsuits. But we don't have time for that. If you want to get all that info, you got to wait for the Netflix special for that. But seriously, if you want to hear, I tell my story on my YouTube channel and things like that. But the point is that I realized that I had to grow as a leader, not as a manager, but as a leader. And for me to reach my goals and really to do justice to my employees and my customers, I said, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes to become that type of leader. And I took courses. I read so many books. I got coaches. I took courses. But what I also did is I actually signed up and earned a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And when I talk about spiritual psychology, it has nothing to do with religion. It's psychology. We learn 8 different psychoanalysis techniques just from a very compassionate and empathetic point of view. And the funny thing is, out of everything that I learned and my coaches and my teachers and everything else, when I started applying what I learned in that master's of psychology to my businesses, so to myself and to my leadership, then that's when we really started to take off. We were on the Inc. 5. This is when I had a couple software companies in California. We were on the Inc. 5000 list a couple years in a row of fastest growing private companies. We were voted the #1 best place to work, which I'm really proud about. And I won Social Entrepreneur of the Year. That was externally, but internally, it's like I was finally having fun as a leader because I was growing something that was worthwhile. I was watching my employees grow as people. We were delivering great value to customers, and I was giving back to my community. And it was all easy. It didn't have to be hard because before I made these changes, I was just I looked cool and like I got it together on the outside, but on the inside, I would feel like a fraud. I would constantly be doubting myself. And so I realized that there's a lot better ways to go through this. And a lot of it has to do because I have the master's in psychology. I went on to get a neuroscience certificate because I really enjoy understanding what makes me tick and what makes other people tick. And so what happened then after I made these changes in there were the changes in me and the changes in my organizations. A couple of people I know, business owners in California, saw the changes in me personally and my business went through. They said, "Hey, Mike, what are you doing over there? Can you help us over here with my business?" And I found out I really enjoyed coaching and teaching and training other leaders and helping other businesses. And I looked at my life and I spent 22 years in accounting software. And I'm like, hey, maybe it's time for a change. And I know what you're thinking out there. You're like, accounting and software. Are there any, and especially when you mix them, are there any 2 subjects that are sexier in the world? Especially when you mix accounting software, and you must have been like a rock star, Mike. That's what people say. I'm like, yeah, I was a bit of a rock star in that industry, but seriously, I love my accounting software days. But I'm like, hey, maybe it's time for something different. So I sold off 2 of my companies. I still own one of them. And what I really do is I teach the mindset of leadership around the world. Companies like Uber, Microsoft, Salesforce, they're all companies that bring me in to level up their leaders. And I got a couple best-selling books, et cetera. So that's a little bit about me and about my background. So I do mentoring, I do a little bit of coaching, advising, I'm on some boards, and I do a lot of training. Again, not about management, but about the psychology and the mindset that leaders need to scale their business, because really, I find that true leadership is a mind game. How do you really trust yourself? How do you have that inner resilience? How do you have that leadership presence that's authentic? Everybody talks about being authentic, but being authentic is a byproduct of really understanding and trusting yourself. So I do a lot of reflective type things and help people really bring out their best. And so, March 2020 came, and all of a sudden we're in lockdown, and we're going through more change. I say in the first couple months of 2020 that a lot of leaders have been through more change than they have in the last 30 years. And it's not any change that we were ready for. And what I also realized is in my work life, as a leader, first of all, I worked for a North American-based company during 9/11. So I saw what a crisis did, the 9/11 terrorist attacks in 2001. I saw what happened to businesses and leaders when the terrorists hit, because it was especially in North America, and I know around the world, when those terrorist attacks happened, the planes came into the towers, business just stopped. I mean, with this pandemic, I think we had a little heads up that it was coming, and then business just stopped. So a lot of leaders had to really adjust quickly. Then I went through, I briefly mentioned a really crazy business lawsuit and things with a business partner. And I learned a lot about what leaders have to do and what businesses have to do through crises. So actually, when the Great Recession hit a couple years ago, and I owned 3 software companies, I knew what to do personally, and I knew what to do for my businesses, and we actually doubled in revenue and doubled in profit in the Great Recession. So I have a bit of a toolkit for leaders when you are dealing with difficult situations. And I've been working and leading remotely for over 20 years. I actually lived in Europe when for a technology company remotely for a North American-based software company. And when I had my companies, Well, the one was 2/3 remote, so we were in a hybrid environment, and that's the one that won the #1 best place to work. So I know a lot of leaders here are struggling with, oh my gosh, we're on Zoom all the time, we're on these video things all the time. My people seem burnt out. I don't know how to engage them. I don't have to motivate them, know how to motivate them. I'm feeling a bit down myself. If that's you as a leader, then what we're going to talk about is really relevant. And that's what I put in my book, Leading in the Next Normal. And maybe somebody on there here that's running it can also drop in the chat the book link to get the book for anybody who doesn't have it. Because everything we talk about, I don't want you to worry about notes now, because everything we talk about is in the book. So I really just want everybody to be present. So again, start thinking about your questions, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my 12 principles that I share in the book. And then that's going to give you some context about what leaders need to do now. And then Simon and I will have that conversation to really get deeper into some of the things. So what I'm going to do is I am going to share my, and if you'll see there's a link for the book they put in the chat, as well as a high performance online team, virtual team course they'll talk about at the end. And then please do connect to me on LinkedIn. It's always great to be connected to other leaders. And I am going to share my thing. And if you can see the whiteboard okay. Well, it looks like I can't see the whiteboard okay. All right, let me just try to share the whole screen here. Zoom, don't fail me now, right? Meeting controls. Stop share. Give this another shot. Let's do it this way. All right. All right, just checking. Can you see the infographic? Yes, we can. All right, great. Now, excellent, everybody. Thank you. So, and here I'm just going to talk through this infographic a little bit. And it's just nice sometimes for me to. I'm a visual learner, so it's nice just to follow along with those things. Now, when it comes to where we are at as leaders in organizations, principle one is you can't sprint a marathon. And the reason I put this out here is I believe we went through 3 different phases in this through the pandemic. The first couple of weeks, I say, was like a street fight. As business owners, all of a sudden we're quarantined, we're working from home. It's like, business might be down. Nobody's really doing any business. Maybe you had to do layoffs or furloughs. And I say that was like a street fight. It was like a street fight because for 2, 3, 4 weeks, you as a business leader had to make massive decisions around cash flow, around people, around offices, etc., with very limited information. And probably you've never dealt with anything like that before. And you really had to make some quick, hard strikes quickly just to stay alive, just like in a street fight. So that was the first couple of weeks. And then it's like, okay, we got through that. We know we're going to survive, right? We know we're going to still be in business. And we had to make some of these difficult things. And make no mistake, that was difficult on so many leaders. I've had, I worked with a lot of leaders that I advise, and they're like, look, I've had to lay off 75% of my people. This has been the hardest last 48 hours of my life. So if you went through a difficult time, then you're not alone. That was crazy. And then the next phase was sort of like a sprint, because it's like, hey, now we figured out what we have to do to pivot. Hey, maybe we're working from home. We do calls this way. We're going to maybe change our product offering. And everybody did the pivot, smart pivots. But the thing is, when you pivot, it takes a lot of energy, and it's like a sprint. And remember, back in March 2020, we thought this was going to be over in June or July. We thought it was going to be over by summer. So we got our teams to sprint. And the thing is, teams were sprinting, but they were sprinting based on fear, because a lot of employees, they were scared about their job, they were scared about their company, they were scared about the industry, whether they would keep their job. There's all this crazy news. A lot of people, maybe they got COVID, or maybe one of their relatives got COVID. So there was just a lot of people were working a lot and really truly sprinting, using a lot of energy. But what happened is the pandemic went past July, right? We're really still in it in a lot of ways, and people are still sprinting. The problem is, when you sprint a marathon, you get really exhausted. And my team and I did a really in-depth study of the workforce at the end of last year, and people are exhausted. And I'll tell you, people are on a precipice of burnout, and this is worldwide. And I talked to Simon, checked in, and this is your industry too. And so that's principle one. We got to treat this like a marathon now. And so that means simplifying. That means taking care of our people. We'll go into that in a couple minutes. Principle two, leadership is personal now, and care about the person and their care. They will care about their job. And what that means is you as a leader, you got to bring out your best right now, because people need you. Your staff needs you. And it's very difficult because we're under more pressure than ever, but we also need to spend more time being leaders. And so I tell leaders, if you're used to spending 10 to 20 hours a week leading, working with your team, doing meetings with them, checking in, doing one-on-ones, you need to double that, because they need you. They need to see you're there. They need to have hope in you. They need to get more direction, especially through all these changes. You need to take care of your people. When I talk about leadership as personal now, I talk about there used to be a bit of a separation between boss and the employees' home lives. But now that people are working out of their homes, right, you really need to know their personal situations. I worked with one leader, and she was a country manager for Germany. And what happened is she had a 10-month-old baby at home, and her husband worked in oil and gas. And so he was in the apartment for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks he was out of the apartment. So this lady is trying to run a country, a major country, for this training thing. And 2 weeks out of every 4 weeks, she has to deal with a 10-month-old baby. And I'm like, how are you doing? She said, I have no idea. And so if her boss didn't know that, he's failing her or she's failing her, right? Because your boss, you as a boss, need to know what people's home life is like if they are forced to work from home. And people's family will get COVID. Like a lot of people take care of elderly relatives, and if them or somebody from their family gets, they have to be a caretaker for them, or they get COVID themselves or whatever, you really have to know that. And the thing is, and that's what I mean by principle three: care about the person and care about their job. This is the time where they need your empathy. They need you to care about them as people. And if you want to gain loyalty, and you want to gain the respect of your people for a long term, then you really got to make this extra effort to really get to know them, what's going on, to really show them that care, because that's going to get them on your side. And it's not just them. When other people in your organization are seeing that you're going to this next level, that's where they're going to really respond. Principle four, earn the right to have real conversations, and you don't find out about mental health issues until it's too late. I told you people are struggling. 3 out of every 4 executives, directors, and managers, 3 out of every 4 are having mental health issues, and 1 out of every 4, it's serious. And so that means if you have an 8-person management team, 6 out of 8 of them are struggling, and 2 out of 8 of them are in a really difficult position. And so many leaders right now tell me, like, hey, I know I know my team's not doing well. I can feel it. I just when I ask them how they're doing, they're like, oh yeah, hey, it's okay. It's everything's fine. So their intuition is telling them that their team needs help, but they don't know really how to get that information out of them and address them. And that's what I go through the book, and that's what I go through in the course. So if you're a leader there and you're like, hey, I know everything isn't right with my people. I know I should be making moves. I just don't know what they are. And I'm really feeling that this is going to get worse and worse unless I do something. Then look at the book and look at the course, which we'll talk about at the end. Because if somebody reaches burnout, I believe you failed them as a leader. Because if somebody reaches burnout, so many people I talk to are medicating themselves, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether people are having problems getting sleep. People are on sleep pills for the first time in their life. They're on anti-anxiety medication, food, everything else that they're using to manage this stress, which is not a great long-term solution, obviously. And when people do hit burnout, do hit this nervous breakdown, do all of a sudden call you up and say, hey, I'm in the hospital, or I need a couple weeks off. It takes weeks or months to get past pure burnout from your employees. And then look what happens to the rest of your team. Then they have to pick up the slack from them, and they know somebody else just burnt out, and they're like, well, what am I doing working here? What am I really doing? If people from the team are burning out, they're dropping off, I have to take up their workload, and the company really doesn't care about my well-being. I don't really know if this is the right place for me. I'm going to go to somewhere where it takes care of me. And Microsoft just put out a survey that said 41% of people are really struggling right now. and are looking for a new job because they're not sure that they're where they're working now is a great long-term place. So we really need to step up as leaders. Run tight meetings, period. Like I could talk for hours about virtual meetings, but I want to focus more on, because so much of our life revolves around virtual meetings. I want to keep going through these principles, and if it comes up with questions with Simon, we will. I just want to respect everybody's time. Same with empowered accountability leads to a strong culture. There's so much about accountability. There's so much about culture when leading remotely that you need to put into your organization. If you feel that the culture is slipping, if you feel people aren't motivated, you really need to, there's a lot of best practices that maybe you haven't been exposed to that you really need to be employing now to get your team back engaged, back accountable. Because everybody wants to do a good job. So if somebody is slipping, it's your job as a leader. So many people come to me and they're like, oh, my meetings are flat. And they're almost like saying that it's their employees' fault. If you're running the meeting, it's up to you to run a great meeting. And there's a lot of tools and techniques to do that. And if somebody is slipping in their performance or their motivation, that is your responsibility. That's not their responsibility. If you're the leader, that's your responsibility. So you really have to make sure you're upskilling yourself. You have the tools and you have the skills to serve your people and be that type of leaders. One of the things you can do, and this is a real simple one, is what happens is when people are used to being in an office or seeing their people face to face, and all of a sudden they're doing virtual or remote work, the managers are saying to me like, I just don't know what they're doing all day. I'm sure they're busy because I get emails all different times, but I want to know what they're doing every day. And they don't ever say this to your employee. Hey, every day when you're done, I want you to send a list of everything you did yesterday, because these managers, they really want to control everything. And because you're not in the office, it's like, oh, I don't know what they're doing. And it's like you have this thing like, are they working? Are they working hard? Are they just sitting at home on the sofa watching Netflix? Are they slacking off? That type of micromanagement is really going to turn people off. And really, that's the exact opposite thing you want to do. A lot of people know that management and leadership is about empowering people and having them reach goals. Now, what you want to do, and this is up for you, up to bring you to level yourself up as a manager and leader, or to really get clear about what you expect out of people as far as outcomes and results, and make sure they're clear in that, and then have them go do that, empower them and trust them to do that. If they get that done in 6 hours a day, who cares? What do you really care? But chances are they're not. Chances are actually the statistics have showed people are working more now, because there's not that separation between work and the office and things. And when you start getting like nosy and not trusting them, what did you do yesterday? And can you send me a list of everything you did? They're like, well, I just worked 10 hours for you. I really don't want to make a list. I really don't like that. And so you have to realize that it's up to you to empower them. That doesn't mean you don't have check-ins. That doesn't mean you don't have rules and boundaries and things. But I just really want you to reflect on your behavior around that. Because on principle number 10 and principle number 11, there's so much negativity out there. People are struggling. People are locked down. I heard in South Africa, I think you guys even had alcohol restrictions where you couldn't even buy alcohol. And, anyway, people are just really struggling with how to get through that. And a lot of people are using work. And this is a great way you can be of service to, and I talk of being of service because I really believe great leaders are of service. That's why we talk about servant leadership, are in service to both their customers and their employees, and really there to make sure that the way I think of it is I'm there to make sure my employees have everything that they can do to serve the customer. And I had one boss, and I always remember this because, but at the end of the day, your employees are the one knows with the customer, not necessarily you, especially in a larger organization. And if they're nose to nose with the customer, it's my job to make sure that they have all the training and be empowered and have everything that they need to do an amazing job. And he said to me, he goes, and I'll never forget this, Mike, I just make sure my employees are empowered and engaged, and then they worry about the customer. I don't even worry about the customer. I just worry about my employees. I'm like, man, that's always stuck with me. But back to all this craziness, the fact is we got to deal with so much negativity and people out there about the news, about vaccines, about this, about that. they're using work can really be a way to bring some positivity into people's lives because there's a sense of meaning and a purpose. And if you show up and you start to show up with that negative energy and you start to doubt yourself and you start to doubt your if you are going through a low point, because I'll tell you, for me and everybody else, it's been more a roller coaster, and that's okay. You're human. You're going to go through that. But if you're on the down, if you're feeling a little bit depressed, don't address your team. Reschedule things, because the one time you show up and you don't believe in your company or yourself, they're going to sense that energy and they're going to lose hope and lose faith. Just think about it. If one of your leaders, whether it's through a company or it's through, you know, a politician, the one time that they show up and they're like, oh, this is tough, I don't know how we're going to get through this, everybody pounces on them. And it's almost not fair, because as a leader, I'm not saying don't be authentic. You got to be authentic and you got to be honest, but you got to be like, hey, look, we're going to get through this. We're going to be strong. Here's what we're going to do. You want to be absolutely authentic and truthful about where you're at now. But then you're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it. We're going to get together. They just want to know that there's hope. And so you've always got to bring that positive type hope, because, you know, at the end of the day, your culture, your agility, and your people are your long-term competitive advantages. We used to think it was you know, intellectual property or market share. Well, you know, what this pandemic, the last 12, 13 months have shown us, it's your people and it's your culture, because the people that are winning now are the people that could quickly could quickly adapt to that. So, all right, I feel like I've been talking and talking and talking. Son, are you there? We're going to do a little back and forth, I believe. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right, Michael. So firstly, yeah, welcome to virtual South Africa. Hopefully we can get you here when we can all start moving around again. It's still quite difficult for South Africans to leave the country. I've heard of people having to go via Kenya just so that they can get into the UK without staying in a Hilton hotel at Heathrow. So but thanks for your talk, and to all the viewers, everyone that tuned in. It's great to see you again. It's been a while since I've been on Insuretalk. I actually, before I get into the questions, I came across Michael's book because as a leader in our business, I was kind of feeling, you know, it was easy. Well, I'm not gonna say easy, but it was easy to go into lockdown and to start remote working when we didn't have a choice. You know, we were kind of, like you said, the street fight. You know, you're in it and you just got to start throwing punches, or you could run away, I guess. But if you're in a corner, you've got to you actually have to engage with this thing. So we didn't have an option. We had to keep going. And that was almost easier than where we're finding ourselves now, because now we have to make a choice. We know that the lockdown restrictions are easing in most countries, and we so for me as a leader, I was kind of going, well, what do we do next? You know, do we kind of go back to the way we were? And so I remember Googling. You know, I don't think I typed in leading in the next normal, but I came across your book and I downloaded it, read it, bought it for my team. And those 12 principles have really sort of made a difference. So when you agreed to come on to Insuretalk, I thought, and I must tell you, Michael, I've got my team watching your website now, and lots of people from Joburg are downloading your book at the moment. So I think what you're saying is actually resonating. There's a little ticker thing that pops up every time somebody downloads it. So yeah, the kind of the sort of things that have jumped out for me. So now we're kind of going, do we carry on working from home, or do we go back to the office? So we kind of, you mentioned in your talk now, you said leaders are burnt out, our teams are burnt out, and I think that, you know, one of the things that I felt myself doing is kind of going, okay, my guys are burning out. I need to get them back into the office. Is that the right reaction? Or do you think we'd be kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a funny thing, Simon. And almost everybody I talk to are going to make changes. I mean, almost, because there are benefits to working at home. You know, no commute, connected with your family. In a way, you're more productive sometimes. And so, to me, there's like working from home all the time and working from the office. And I think there's a sweet spot in there for 95% of companies that's some sort of hybrid. And because it's really hard, I think, nowadays to do too much either way. Because when you do have a virtual team, you can hire much better talent because you're not geographically, you don't have the geographic issues. You have people with different life situations, et cetera. And then also when you're virtual, you have to spend a lot of time getting around the no FaceTime type thing, which you can do, but it's very intentional and it takes a lot of effort to do that. So, and all the studies have said is people like working from home. They really have now that they got a taste of it, because a lot of people obviously were forced to do it. Pretty much everybody is forced to do it. When traditionally we said we couldn't do it or it wouldn't work for our company or it wouldn't. It's like, oh yeah, it will work for us. And so people want, and I'm going to use the word hybrid. There's going to be a lot of hybrid solutions. And the thing is, I'm not even sure we can because we don't know if there's going to be more lockdowns. We don't know if there's going to be more whatever there is. So I don't even think it's time for that long-term strategy. But I think it's time for the medium-term strategies, say over the next 3 months, over the next 6 months, because people want to get their head around things, and we have to be more creative. So I know this isn't super specific, but I think a lot of people are going to land in the middle. And I think even if people go very virtual and say a lot of people can work it from home, I think that's going to actually lend itself to more like team building exercises. Because if I do have a fully virtual team, say they're all in the same country, I do want to get them together at least every quarter to spend a day together, just gaining that trust, just seeing them. So I do, and again, I think that's where the creativity comes in, where you got to work, you got to almost figure out what's going to work for you, your workforce. What do they want? What are they requiring? There's technical challenges, et cetera, if you have a call center, et cetera, and then work backwards from that, because we can always find solutions. But I just encourage everybody that if you are somebody that always worked at an office and all of a sudden you're fully virtual because of lockdown or whatever, and you really want to get back to the office, yeah, you can get back to the office. Just realize that there may be a sweet spot in there just to really open up your thinking, to really see what's going to work for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. And I think on that note, it working for everybody. One of the things you talk about in your book is that distinction. You mentioned specifically introverts and extroverts. Getting to know who they are. I think a lot of people don't really understand the definitions properly. But knowing who they are and then kind of figuring out how the virtual thing might be working or not working for them. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. That's a great thing to bring up, because it's something very something everybody can use right away. And when I talk about this, people are probably going to go, "Oh yeah, I sort of know that, but let's take it to the next level and really make sure everybody's implementing it." And really quick, Simon, how long are we going to go? Because I can do long answers or short answers. How much more time do we have again?
I think we've got a good sort of 20 minutes left, so we're good.
So a lot of people know, but I'm just going to go over the definitions. You have extroverts, which love being around people, love talking, love crowds. And the actual definition of an extrovert are people that get energized by being around people. And when they're alone too much, they get that drains their energy. And then you have introverts who really love being alone. They love reading, maybe they love writing, those type of things. Sometimes they're very analytical, and they recharge by being alone, and being around a lot of people draws their energy. So, and funny thing is, a lot of professional speakers are a bit introverted. So it's not even how do they think, it's how do they gain their energy. Most everybody is in the middle. There's not many pure extroverts or introverts, but normally people are on the middle. And so, but it's where are they at on there? And a lot of salespeople, for example, are extroverted. Now, when it comes to working from home or working virtually, the extroverts, the farther people are on the extrovert scale, the more difficult this has been for them, because they miss that camaraderie of the office. And what you want to do with extroverts is recognize your extroverts and make sure that they have an outlet for their talking, their energy. Especially if they're used to chatting a lot, and that might be as simple as maybe doing a daily coffee with for half an hour or an hour, just for anybody who wants to pop in, to just chat about things. Or you might make sure that everybody has a buddy that they check in with, especially on the extroverted side, once a day, just to chat with people, because that will really affect their mental health. Introverts, on the other hand, they're really thriving working from home because they're getting all their stuff done. They're like, nobody's there to bug me because I'm at the office, everybody talks to me, and I'm a bit introverted, a little bit introverted, and so I get this. And it's funny because my wife is extroverted, so she doesn't have anybody to talk to, so she'll start talking to me, and it's like we're trying to figure each other out here. So you really, the people in your household, even this even affects people in your household. And so, but introverts, though, oftentimes they'll get forgotten about. And so you as a leader, you might have this introvert and you're like, hey, Simon's getting all this stuff done. He's amazing. But then I don't talk to him for 3 weeks. And then I find, I'm getting emails at weird times from him, because what you need to do is you need to make sure you're checking in with those introverts. You need to be having one-on-ones with your meeting, with your team, probably every 2 weeks. And this can be a 10-minute check-in. Hey, Simon, how you doing, man? How's things? Listen to him. Again, I go through in the course, I go through how to spot mental health issues proactively, and because you really want to have your antennas up for these to get them, because the quicker you get them, the quicker you can address them. So the introverts, you don't want them to be forgotten about, and you want to make sure you're supporting them. And there's different ways to do that. The extroverts, you want to make sure there's an outlet for their energy, and again, extroverts love talking to other extroverts. So you can literally tell 2 extroverts just talk to each other at 10 a.m. every day, and just to burn off that extra energy.
Yeah, bring in the extroverts.
Yeah, I'm going to go hide personally. You guys talk.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah. So on that note, Michael, we got a question here from Cliff in the audience, and he says, how do you get to know more about the personal life of your employees or your team without appearing to be nosy? And I guess, when you've got a bigger team, you may not have had personal relationships with everybody before lockdown, and you quite possibly don't have, technology that you can rely on to measure productivity. So, to try and, balance, not putting people under pressure, not making them feel like they're being micromanaged, but at the same time, feeling like you've got some control over your business still. Any suggestions around that?
Yeah, great question, Simon. And for everybody, this comes up a lot because, first of all, trust your intuition. If your intuition is telling you something's going on with them that's not, you can tell they're falling off a little bit, that's probably accurate. And you really need to be setting up these one-on-ones. And that's what's great about these consistent one-on-ones. And in these one-on-ones, you really have to listen and show empathy and really give them this safe place to share. And again, in the course, I have literally a step-by-step outline of how to run these one-on-ones, because there's a lot of psychology to this. How do you create a safe space? How do you get them talking? How do you share vulnerably? Because sometimes one tactic is for you to share something about yourself. And there's ways to ask these questions out of like a curiosity instead of in a really supportive way, because and even asking these questions are going to let them know that you care about them. Because, I have one, this guy was a managing director, and he's really busting his butt to do everything for his employees. I said, well, how are you doing? He's like, well, actually, I'm leaving. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I was going through a tough time. And then I went to the owner, and the owner could tell I was going through a tough time. And then, because finally I told him, look, I'm taking 2 weeks off. I need to recharge, or a week off. I need to recharge. The owner said, okay, yeah, you can do that. And the MD said, when he came back, the owner didn't even ask me how I'm doing. And he's like, all I wanted him to do was just show some care. Just say, hey, you feeling better, man? I know you were going through a tough time. I appreciate that. That was all the guy was looking for. That's all the guy was looking for. He didn't get any of that. It was all about making money for the owner. He's like, look, I'm not going to deal with this. I do a good job. I'm going to go do a good job for somebody that cares. And so there's a lot about empathy. And I give a story in the book about I don't want to get too far into that, but that's what I mean. Care about the person, have real conversations, share some real things about you. But when you share about you, this is sort of what I talked about before, that you have to be vulnerable in the correct way, because being vulnerable, there's so much to vulnerability and authenticity in leadership. being vulnerable doesn't mean puking all your problems over your team, because then they're going to get freaked out. Being vulnerable means, hey, yesterday I went through a bit of a tough time, so I took a half day off. Because when you say that, then you tell them it's okay for them to them to not be perfect all the time. It's okay for them to take a mental half day off, right? Because they're just, they're burnt out or whatever. But you don't ever want to be in that downtime again when you talk to them, because that energy transfers. So your authenticity, you can talk about something that happened, but you don't ever want to show up with that energy. But though by talking about it, you make it okay for them, because they're going to mirror what you do and what you say. And so that really is important.
Thank you. Another question here, cameras on or off?
So it's interesting. I was always like a camera on guy, and then I read a post, and people talked about a couple things. One is, look, if it's a tight knit group, like if we're in a management meeting and it's me and 4 or 5 people, we're doing a half an hour to an hour, maybe even 2 hours, but it's like really important stuff. Cameras on. Look, we're in a management team. You need to put your camera on if you're in my management team. If it's 20 people, if it's 30 people, if it's a weekly meeting where people are only need to be engaged part of it, because look, we do weekly status, maybe project teams where I got 4 different projects going on and people are in different teams. Keep your cams off, drink your coffee, go to the bathroom, make a bagel, whatever it is, just be present when you're present. And also culturally it's different. I realize that some cultures are, American, it's like, hey, put us in front of a camera, no problem. A lot of us, but some people, are shy, they don't like the camera. So don't get too caught up in this camera on, camera off, because it's more about your insecurity, honestly, as the presenter, because, and I get it, trust me, I love presenting to live groups, and I'm, looking at my camera, I'm trying to look at Simon out of this thing, I'm looking at the camera, trying to keep my energy up. And even when Simon smiles and stuff, I get that, but, and I understand that you want that real-time feedback, but at the end of the day, it's, forcing people to put their cameras on are going to be, it's a little bit annoying, because they're like, look, I just want to sit back, and if I'm not in frame, or my cat comes in, or my kid's having an issue, I really don't want that on camera, because that's a lot of what we're dealing with. So it's a bit situational, but give people a little more of a break. And if you do need that feedback, talk to 2 or 3 of your close friends in the group and say, hey, do me a favor, keep your camera on and just give me some thumbs up or some things. And what I do, I teach these 2-hour-long leadership masterminds, and every so often I'll say, hey, does this make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you're with me. And it's just nice for me to get that thing that they can still hear me, that I'm still on the right track, because we don't know. And look, it's hard doing meetings with these cameras, but again, it's just a way for you to really up your game.
Yeah, no, that's valid. I mean, try doing comedy on virtual, it's just little crickets chirping in the background. But I think one of the questions that came up in our business, and I see somebody's just asked something connected to that on the group. It's about culture, and you do deal with it in your book, culture, and being able to create sort of deep connections in this virtual space. So now we do have, as you mentioned, we've got the option to have get-togethers. People can go back to the office if they feel safe enough to do that. But if we are working almost completely online, how do you still create those deep connections with people? What do those one-on-ones look like? How do you make sure the company culture is still kind of flowing when people aren't kind of getting back together?
Yeah, I get that. I get that. To me, there's 2 things I'm going to answer here. One is, how do you do the deep connections? And second is culture. The first about connections, it's like, now that we're virtual, we have to be intentional about everything that happened by accident, because no matter what happens, Simon and I are not going to meet at the coffee, at the coffee thing, or go to lunch when we're working virtual. So you have to allow for that. And what that might look like is, every Friday, I have a different, I have a half an hour virtual coffee with some random person in the organization, or from, if I'm in sales, it's maybe with somebody in marketing or finance or whatever it is, so that we can have those water cooler conversations, and they work out surprisingly well. You just have to put those in people's calendar or make a way for those to happen. And you know what? I was in London before that. I was in San Diego near Los Angeles. So everybody would want to meet for a coffee. I'm like, well, if I meet you for a coffee, that's a 4-hour freaking thing. It's not like meeting for a coffee is easy. So I'm like, let's do a virtual coffee. And people are like, oh, I need face to face. But the fact is, I like virtual coffees better. I like 25-minute virtual coffees better than meeting in person, because to be honest, half the people I don't really like that much. No, I'm just joking. But I'm not like committed to like an hour coffee, because it seems like when you meet for a coffee, you're always committed to a 45-minute conversation. It always starts out here. How's the weather? How's your van? When you have a 25-minute virtual coffee, it's literally half an hour out of your day. You get right to the stuff more quicker. There's less fluff. I do care a little if you have kids or not, but what I more care is we can do business together. And that's not a problem. People are like, oh, I like these relationships. I like relationships with people I can do business with. So let's find out if we're a match business-wise, and then work outwards from there. Let's work on the connection first.
Good. Michael, when we chatted last week for the first time, and you said something really interesting to me, and I'll just bring everyone into the picture here. What I said to Michael when we chatted was, we had just had a meeting at our office, and we were really going through some of the more creative things in the business, looking at our purpose statement, why are we here? Those are the kind of questions, dealing with some of the marketing things and leadership generally. And we got together for that meeting. I flew up to Johannesburg, and we had a face-to-face, and it felt like we were able to kind of create something. Took the whole day. Then I mentioned this to you, and you said to me, you don't believe that people can be creative in a group like that. And in fact, when you do things virtually, there might even be a better way of coming up with creative things, marketing ideas, purpose statements, whatever it is. Do you remember that conversation and what you said to me?
Yes, Simon, this is a cool thing to bring up. And let me give everybody context before everybody says you don't believe in collaboration, because collaboration is amazing in certain areas, but they found, Harvard did some great studies that when it comes to creativity, when you're in a group, that stifles creativity. And so creativity, because I'll tell you what, say Michelangelo, when he was going to paint the Sistine Chapel, he got his 5 buddies together. He's like, I want to do this one person pointing to this other person. They're like, that's not going to look good. Maybe we should just have something standard. Or, when Steve Jobs had the idea for the iPod, like, we're going to make a Walkman, but we're going to put more things on it, and everybody's more songs, everything like that. That's stupid, right? They say back when you had horse-drawn carriages, if you asked people what they wanted, nobody would say a car. They would say better horse-drawn carriages. So when it comes to being really, truly creative and looking for something out of the box, when you have more people in it, people play it safe, because true creativity, genius creativity, comes from one person's vision. And so collaboration works great when you got to make sure that, like, finance and sales got to work together. You want to collaborate on that action plan. You definitely want divisions and people from different areas to collaborate, for sure. And that's, people work too siloed, absolutely. But when it comes to being innovative, here's the thing I gave to Simon that I think makes a lot of sense. If I was having a thing like, hey, we need a new product, or we need a new tagline for this, the worst thing to do is get everybody together, because then we get the most boring things, because nobody wants to take a chance. So what I'm going to say is, to me and to Simon and to everybody else, I want you to think of your 3 best taglines. I want you to bring them to the meeting, and then we're all going to throw them on a board. And what that's going to do is everybody's individual creativity and risk taking is going to be at play. And then you get all of them. And then you got to be careful not to talk yourself out of something a bit gutsy. And that way you get the best of both worlds, because obviously you don't want to just leave it to somebody and hope it works. You do want more people in it, but that's a really good way to get people creative. That's what we were talking about, right, Simon?
Yeah, that is, and I think we're going to try this in our business. I'm not 100% convinced that it'll work, but I think it's certainly worth a shot. The other thing that's come up in the chats is, virtual doesn't seem to work that well for onboarding especially new people in the business, but if you're a broker and you're in sales, you know, doing a virtual meeting the first time you meet someone or the first time they get brought into the business, you know, there's a bit of, you know, does that work? Am I on the same footing that I was on before the pandemic? You know, what do you think about that? I think, sorry, Michael, before you answer, with the employees, one of the things that people have been saying, you know, you learn a lot from eavesdropping when you're in an open plan office, and you obviously don't get that in virtual. So yeah, sorry to interrupt. Back to you.
Well, let's handle all these, because again, you brought up a couple of things. One, learning from other people, eavesdropping. You know, two is onboarding. The third is culture. And again, each one of these things that happen by accident in the office, you have to be intentional about. And I make the case, when you're intentional about them, you do them better, but you just have to put effort into them. So let's talk about eavesdropping. And this is something we chatted about. So, you know, if I'm a junior programmer, I hang out with the senior programmers, I hear them solving each other's issues, then I learn from what they're doing. Well, why don't, like, once every 2 weeks, you have a best practices session where for an hour, all the junior programmers join a senior programmer. He talks about something that he did, or she talks about something she did, and everybody else can learn from what she did. And you do the mentoring sessions that way. And you're getting the exact same, not the exact same thing, but you're making it intentional. And so that's, you know, for example, you're eavesdropping, or what a lot of people have done, have set up mentors. So, you know, Simon's my mentor, so we're supposed to talk half an hour every week. That works really well, so that I have somebody to go to, or he can check over something, et cetera, on that. So that's one quick thing. And that's not even being intentional, putting in a system around anything that we want to do. Onboarding. So most people are not great on onboarding anyway, but it's more important virtually. And the fact is, you really should, again, create times and create spaces for people to connect with other people in the organization. So if I'm new, Simon should have like my first 3 days planned out. I should spend, and we talk about culture, you know, I talk to people that are like, well, what is your culture? Well, you know, sort of this and sort of that. Well, if you haven't defined your culture, how can people adapt to your culture? And so when you do your meetings, what do you do for culture in every meeting? Oh, we really don't do anything. Well, you've got some work to do. So when it comes to onboarding, you really have to plan out, hey, if it's important for me to create a connection with Simon, then we should have a half an hour conversation every 2 days for 2 weeks. And again, I'm a big believer in the short, frequent conversations or meetings. I like 10-minute check-ins. I like 15-minute check-ins once every 3 days, rather than a 2-hour meeting or 1-hour meeting once a week or once every 2 weeks, because it keeps things fresh, and it keeps the way the brain works, and the way neuroscience works is, we do small things over a frequent period of time, or how relationships are done, or how our brain rewires. So, you know, get out of these 1 or 2 hour meetings, get into these things. Hey, Simon, let's catch up every, you know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8:45. Let's just do a check-in. That would really help me. And then we can be on the same page. Cool, Mike, I can do 15 minutes, no problem. So those type of things for check-in. And culture, you got to define your culture. You know, when we defining my culture was a huge step in my organization. And that went into the job ads I wrote. Once I got clear about my culture, my vision, and my purpose, that went into every job ad I wrote. That went into every conversation with a prospective employee, into every job interview. That went into who we pick. That went into how they get compensated. That went into how we do our employee reviews. That went into every time we had any meeting, we started off with something with culture. And that was in person or virtually. So if you want to have a strong culture, you got to get clear about what that culture is. And then it should be in your DNA. And again, great companies do that. And companies that didn't do that could sort of slide by with that before. But now that we're virtual, it's like, that's what I mean. You got to bring your A game, and you got to like really look at everything you do. But when you do, it's amazing, because people talk about accountability and motivation. When you have your culture rocking and rolling, that takes care of itself. People hold themselves accountable because they believe so much in the organization.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I want to have one final question, and it's really just your thoughts on this. And then we literally have sort of 2 or 3 minutes. What would you say to this? The world of work, well, let's look at it this way. Most leadership positions in South Africa, and I think in many countries, are held by men. Okay, that's a fact in most countries, including our own. In our industry particularly, the world of work was designed by men for men. We don't have to go and have babies. We don't often have the family responsibilities on our shoulders. So when the pandemic came along and the subsequent lockdowns and the work from home, some people call this the Great Equalizer, because now, nobody's really prejudiced by this thing where you've got to kind of get in your car and go to another place and ask for time off. And I think that a lot of the voices that are saying the work from home works for us might be coming from people that are going, look, I didn't feel that I was in a workplace that kind of embraced who I was before. And now it does. So I mean, what do you say to that? Are you seeing that kind of conversation happening around this, and people going, we mustn't lose the ground we've gained as we move through this?
Yeah, that's we could have a whole day on that, Simon, and you're exactly right. And I even catch myself, if people are really astute, even sometimes I gave examples, I said he instead of she, and I corrected myself through this presentation. So I have subconscious bias, and I'm really working hard to get over. And women have it difficult because of, and you can talk about this on the gender, on the race level, and all different levels. And it's good we're having these conversations. Unfortunately, yes, it has leveled the playing field somewhat, but also people that oftentimes, for example, now that if the schools aren't open, often that burden goes to the woman instead of the man. Oftentimes, people that may not that might not have as much money are hurt for work from home because they don't have the internet, or they might not have a laptop. So we're seeing this socioeconomically. We're seeing this on the gender. There's not a lot of good, easy fixes for this, especially from South Africa. And I think we really got to be aware as leaders. And again, to me, great leadership takes true honesty with yourself about what you can do about these issues. And I've really caught myself looking at my subconscious biases and really saying, I want to be a leader that empowers everybody. And so that I've made some choices around what I do and different groups that I help, because I'm, to be honest, being born an American and in the place that I was, and given the advantages that I had where I grew up and how I grew up and how I was born, a lot of people don't have that. And so as leaders, to make this place a better place, we really have to do everything we can. I know that might sound a little bit broad, but that's really what I believe. And that's what I do personally. And I just encourage everybody out there just to really, really look deeper within themselves and see their behaviors, their actions, what they say, and how they can be the best leader they can, which takes courage.
R. Michael Anderson. What does the R stand for?
That stands for Robert, and that because really quickly, I'll tell you one really quick story. I was speaking in New Orleans, and I went by Michael Anderson, and as I was registering, the guy goes, "Are you Michael Anderson?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Are you a serial killer?" I'm like, "I don't think so. Why do you ask that?" And he goes, "Well, I Googled," he was joking. He's like, "I Googled Michael Anderson and you're a serial killer in New Orleans, I guess." And so I thought I was pretty, hot stuff at that time. So I went home and I anonymously Googled myself, and Michael and Anderson are the most common first name and last name the year I was born. So there's a ton of Michael Anderson. So my first name is Robert. Okay. So I add the R in front of that, R. Michael Anderson. So I'm Googleable. But but one last thing, Simon, because I did work with you and your organization. I do have a high performing virtual team online course, and I'm giving everybody half off until
thank you.
Yeah, noon tomorrow, UK time. So if anybody out there really is saying, "Hey, I want to be the best leader I can for my organization. I want to learn how to run virtual meetings. I want to learn how to get this culture thing. I want to learn it to the next step." It's only $247. It's over half off of what I normally do it for. There's 5 modules that go through, again, accountability, virtual meetings, etc. I just wanted to put it out there for everybody. I also have an online group. You'll get invited to it after you buy the book, that I answer questions there directly. So if you want direct access to me, that's a great way to do it. So And again, Simon, thanks for having me on here. Again, my last thing is, look, as leaders, we have to deal with so much pressure. And it's almost unfair because we're getting all these different ways, and oftentimes there's no one there to support us. And if my goal is anything, is to be a bit of support for leaders, to say, hey, look, it's difficult. It's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to get things wrong. Have some of that compassion for yourself, because look how much good that you do. Sometimes we focus on all the problems, the things we didn't do perfectly, but I can almost guarantee that everybody on this call does so much for their customers and their employees, and to just give themselves a little bit of a break, especially over these last 13 months, and just to make things a little easier on your own internal life.
Ah, that was brilliant. Michael, it's been great chatting to you. I wish I could give you a virtual high five. Yeah, we can do that. So yeah, all the best and thank you. And I'm sure we'll be chatting soon. I definitely have some things we'd like to try here in South Africa. So I appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you. And please, if you want to do yourself a favor, if you're watching this, get Leading in the Next Normal. It's a brilliant book. It's only $7, I think. And it's really worth making that investment. So thank you, Michael. And yeah, over to you, Nonnie.